You just heard the bitter statements of a snake who unfortunately serves as the governor of California. Some like to refer to him as Gavin Newsom. I like to refer to him as a smarmy failure of a politician out of the state that I was born and raised in.
Gavin Newsom seems to be quite bitter that he missed out on a chance to replace Joe Biden on the Democratic presidential ticket, which instead has gone to Kamala Harris. He went on Pod Save America to sarcastically comment on this. Ana Kasparian has some very harsh words for Gavin Newsom about all of this. We're going to take a look at clips of Ana Kasparian breaking all of this down, clips of Gavin Newsom. I'll add in my thoughts here and there. Let's take a look at this.
How are you feeling about the switch?
I mean,
The switch.
no, we went through a very open process, a very inclusive process. It was bottom up. I don't know if you know that. Yes, that's what I've been told to say.
Yes, it was a blitz primary, I believe is what they called it.
It's a very, very fast blitz.
I think it was
a blink primary, so we call that.
A 30-minute convention, between a tweet and another tweet.
It's amazing how it happened.
Yeah, it's been amazing.
Oh, I'm sure he really does find it funny. He's not bothered by it at all. You just heard the bitter statements of a snake who unfortunately serves as the governor of California. Some like to refer to him as Gavin Newsom. I like to refer to him as a smarmy failure of a politician out of the state that I was born and raised in. Nonetheless, Gavin Newsom was fighting hard to be the guy who stepped in to replace Joe Biden if he dropped out of the race, of course. And now some are noticing, look, he's not really doing the type of campaigning for Kamala Harris that he was doing for Joe Biden. What's going on here? Now, of course, we all know what's going on. Newsom was engaging in that campaigning, not for Joe Biden's sake, but in order to increase his name recognition in case he found himself in a situation where he'd be tapped to replace Joe Biden after he drops out. Now, Newsom went from campaigning hard for Biden to barely campaigning at all on behalf of Kamala Harris, so much so that Democratic operatives are now questioning whether his role as a national surrogate for Harris is really something they can lean on. They're questioning if it's even a thing. And so Politico has a great piece about this. They write that the chatter around Newsom was amplified by his subdued showing at the convention, meaning the Democratic National Convention. He was one of the few major statewide California officials not to speak from the DNC main stage. We were at the DNC. I noticed that. Michael Schor from TYT, of course, interviewed him as he passed by him and they had a conversation. You can check that out. But it was noticeable that Gavin Newsom's presence in official events for the DNC was minimized. And so I didn't know if that was on purpose. I didn't know what was going on with that. I just took note and then kind of forgot about it. And then these pieces get published. And it was just incredible to see that others are noticing it. Then you have Gavin Newsom give that statement to the Pod Save America guys. And you think Gavin Newsom would be worried about the lack of the democratic process to find Biden's replacement? If it were Newsom, he wouldn't have any problem with the blitz primary. We all know that.
I think Ana Kasparian is totally right about this. And the thing about this with Gavin Newsom, he was in a position with a real primary that he might have come out on top. No matter, I know much less about Gavin Newsom than Ana Kasparian does because she lives in California and I don't. But Gavin Newsom, to me, has, whether you like the guy or not, just is like he stepped out of central casting to be a president. The guy, just looks like what we think of as a traditional American president. Obviously, that's except for in one instance, that's always been a white guy. But he just kind of looks and sounds like a president. So he almost certainly would have done well in a primary, in an open primary, I would think. But now Gavin Newsom is maybe kind of screwed because if Kamala Harris wins, okay, that's going to be 4 years. If she does well and gets reelected, that's another 4 years. And then, if she's reelected, then that means that she had a successful presidency with Tim Walz being a part of that success, presumably. And then you'd think that Tim Walz would be the odds-on guy to get the nomination the next time for the Democrats. So that could be 12 or 16 years before Gavin Newsom would really have a shot. So, I mean, he's really gone from somebody who, if it would have been either if Joe Biden had stayed on the ticket and lost, or even if Joe Biden stayed on the ticket and won, and then they had a real primary instead of what happened, you would have to think that Gavin Newsom would have been one of the odds-on favorites to have won that. And now he's way on the outside looking in. So I agree with Ana Kasparian that I think Gavin Newsom is probably very bitter that Kamala Harris got this spot.
Now, Newsom didn't seem to want to take part, possibly over his own frustration that he is not Biden's replacement. The Los Angeles Times reports that convention planners wanted him to kick off Monday night's primetime programming, but the governor begged off. Couldn't make it on time, he said. Children starting a new school year, he explained. Though it's not hard to imagine attending orientation and still making it to the United Center, that's where they had the DNC, which is less than a dozen miles from Chicago's Midway Airport.
I'm sure that wouldn't have mattered if he were the nominee. he would have been there.
Is anyone really going to buy that Gavin Newsom really turned down a primetime speaking role at the DNC because children in California were going back to school? Come on. Now, one Democratic strategist basically said that, Kamala really doesn't need that smarmy SOB the way Biden did. And I love this comment. This is Paul Mitchell. He's a Sacramento-based Democratic consultant. And he says that Newsom was a uniquely good surrogate for Biden. Kamala doesn't need the energy delivery as much right now. That's got to sting. It's got to sting just a little bit. Politico also notes that other top Harris surrogates include Governors Josh Shapiro of Pennsylvania and Andy Beshear of Kentucky, who, unlike Newsom, were both part of the Veep stakes. He wasn't even considered. Oh, he wasn't even considered.
Ana Kasparian is loving this. She really, really hates Gavin Newsom.
Okay, let me pause. Some of you who aren't familiar with my previous stories on Gavin Newsom are probably wondering, geez, what does Ana have against Gavin Newsom? Well, I live in California, so I've seen his lack of leadership. I've seen how awful he has been as a governor. But putting that aside, there's a very specific story that I'd like you to turn to after you watch the show, of course. I did a lengthy, in-depth piece about how Gavin Newsom totally screwed over Californians who lost everything to the largest wildfire in this state that wasn't caused by climate change, okay? Climate change exacerbated it. But what caused that wildfire in California in 2018 was PG&E, one of the utility companies here in this state. They couldn't be bothered to replace a $10 hook that was 100 years old. That hook held the electrical wires up. And when it, deteriorated to the point where the wires fell to the ground, well, that sparked, again, one of the worst wildfires in California's history in 2018. People in that town lost everything, and they still have not been made whole. Gavin Newsom turned around and bailed out PG&E. That's the kind of governor he is. So he likes to puff up his chest and pretend like he's a man of the people. He's not a man of the people. He has been an awful leader in the state. And I have a feeling that, Democrats on a national level see that failure. And that's probably the reason why he wasn't even considered as a, VP pick. All right. Now, with that said, let's also go to Nathan Click, who is the spokesperson for Newsom. He basically says, he is totally focused the next 70 odd days on electing VP Harris, defeating Trump once and for all, and going to the mat for her campaign, just as he did at the convention, on Fox, and elsewhere at the request of her campaign. Okay, so we'll see it. I mean, he's going to headline, a fundraiser for her. Apparently, it's not a problem. He doesn't have any bad feelings. But look, again, in my opinion, the truth is that when he was campaigning on behalf of Biden, when he was going state to state, he wasn't really campaigning for Biden. He was campaigning for himself. Now, why do I believe that? Well, because when he was going state to state, he wasn't talking about Joe Biden's political vision. He was talking about his own political vision, what kind of leader he is. And by the way, if he had anything positive to say about his leadership, just take a look at how he's led California. I mean, he picked fights with red state governors to increase his name recognition. He even had a debate on Fox News with Florida Governor Ron DeSantis when Ron DeSantis was still running in the Republican primary. He also paid for political ads, not promoting Biden, promoting himself, even though he wasn't officially running for anything.
Yeah, what Ana Kasparian is saying here is correct. I mean, Gavin Newsom had definitely positioned himself to where he was waiting in the wings for Joe Biden to fail. And that was a good bet on Gavin Newsom's part because everybody could see, or most people could see, the media tried to act like they were totally shocked when Joe Biden had his terrible debate. But most people could see that there was a pretty good chance that Joe Biden was maybe going to be out of this race. And Gavin Newsom, I would say he was smart to do that. It didn't work out for him, but he was positioning himself to edge in there if Joe Biden had failed, but it didn't work out for Gavin Newsom.
And the LA Times notes that he ran TV ads and put up billboards promoting himself as a champion of abortion rights. Now, look, there's no chance that Kamala Harris is going to drop out of the race. So why the hell would he use up his time and energy to go out there and do campaigning on behalf of Harris? And I say on behalf of Harris because, again, his campaigning on behalf of Joe Biden wasn't really on behalf of Joe Biden. It was on behalf of himself. Finally, just an excerpt that I had to share with you all from the Los Angeles Times. Mark Barabak writes that people who know both of them, meaning Harris and Newsom, said Newsom was not distressed to watch Harris stumble through the early stages of her vice presidency. And they said Harris was not terribly displeased to see Newsom forced to fight an attempted recall, though she did come to California for a homestretch rally on his behalf.
Okay, so it sounds like Gavin Newsom and Kamala Harris, both of them, there's no love lost there.
Remember, we're talking about two California politicians who sure have to work together. They're part of the same party and they were part of the same state. But we're talking about two individuals who are very competitive and are competing against one another for positions of power. And so while they do appear to be friends publicly, behind closed doors, they be sniping. Okay. So I think that the smaller role that he has played in the campaigning for the presidential ticket is really indicative of what motivated him when he previously did the campaigning for Joe Biden. It wasn't for Joe Biden. It was all about Gavin Newsom. And if you look at his so-called leadership in California, everything he has done hasn't been about the people of California. It's always been about Gavin Newsom.
Okay, so Ana Kasparian definitely does not like Gavin Newsom, and she laid out her reasons why there. But again, like I'm saying, Gavin Newsom could be in real trouble in terms of running for president. Now, it's possible, it's looking right now like Kamala Harris will beat Donald Trump. It's possible that she could lose and then all bets are off. Then we would have an open primary. And you would have to think that despite the way Californians look at Gavin Newsom, I don't know that people around the country really understand these problems in the state of California the way that Ana Kasparian does. And I don't know if they would blame Gavin Newsom for them. You would have to think that he would be a front runner for the Democratic ticket if Kamala Harris loses, or if she's elected but doesn't get reelected. If her 4 years don't go well and she's not reelected, you would still have to think that Gavin Newsom would be one of the leading contenders. But that all changes if Kamala Harris gets reelected. It could be quite a while before Gavin Newsom would be in a position to even be able to run. But Do you agree with Ana Kasparian? Do you think that she shares some pretty compelling evidence here that it looks like Gavin Newsom is just all for himself and not really a team player in terms of team politics with his party and with supporting Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. So do you agree with Ana Kasparian, or do you like Gavin Newsom? I'm sure right now the Democratic Party seems to be, mostly united behind Kamala Harris, but I'm sure there were people out there who wanted Gavin Newsom to get the nomination. But what do you think? Make sure to give me a comment on this. Give me a like and subscribe. The channel is really growing quickly. The likes and subscribes help it to just grow more and more. I want to continue to grow this channel and to bring out more content. But I thank you for all of your support. This is Chris on Culture. I will see you in the next video.